What if the deadliest killer in modern history never stalked his victims, never hunted them, never chose them? What if he clocked in, followed procedure, and was paid to kill? This isn't fiction, this is documented history, and the man at the center of it has been almost completely erased. His name was Vasily Blokhin. And by the end of this video, you're going to question everything you think you know about what evil actually looks like. When most people imagine a mass murderer, they picture chaos, rage, madness, a monster you'd recognize across a crowded room. But history hides a different kind of killer entirely, a quiet one, a structured one. Blokhin wasn't a battlefield general, he wasn't a dictator giving speeches, he didn't build an ideology. He worked indoors, in basements, behind locked doors. Born in 1895 in the Russian Empire, Blokhin climbed the ranks of the NKVD, the Soviet secret police, predecessor to the KGB. His specialty: state-sanctioned execution. During the Great Purge of the late 1930s, Stalin was systematically eliminating anyone he considered a threat. Political rivals, military officers, intellectuals, priests, ordinary citizens, accused of disloyalty. Thousands were sentenced to death, tens of thousands, and someone had to carry out those sentences. That someone was Vasily Blokhin. Between 1937 and 1940, Blokhin personally executed thousands of people, not as a supervisor, not by giving orders, with his own hands. Historians estimate he personally shot around 7,000 prisoners during one operation alone. 7,000. For context, the most notorious serial killers in history murdered fewer than 50 people. Some of the most feared, fewer than 20. Blokhin killed more in a single month than most killers managed in a lifetime. His most infamous work was part of what history now calls the Katyn Massacre. In 1940, Stalin ordered the execution of thousands of Polish military officers, police, intellectuals, and civilians, anyone who might resist Soviet occupation. The rationale was cold and political: eliminate Poland's leadership class, prevent future resistance. Blokhin was assigned to run one of the main execution sites, a facility outside Kalinin. He didn't improvise, he prepared. He brought his own equipment from Moscow: a leather butcher's apron, elbow-length leather gloves, a flat cap to keep blood off his hair. His weapon of choice, a German-made Walther pistol. He preferred it over Soviet models: less recoil fatigue, more reliable over extended use. Think about what extended use meant. Each night, prisoners were brought in one by one, hands tied, sentence already signed. They were led into a soundproofed room, one bullet to the back of the head, dragged the body out, next prisoner. He executed up to 250 people in a single night, night after night, for nearly a month. No speeches, no visible rage, no hesitation, just process. He would drink afterward, sleep, wake up, return, and do it again. If this is already making you see history differently, good. That's exactly what this channel is for. Subscribe now, because most history content never touches stories like this. The people who shaped events from the shadows are the ones we should be studying most closely. Now, let's get to the question that really matters. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Blokhin didn't operate outside the law, he operated inside it. Every execution was authorized, every death sentence was signed. The orders came down through official channels and he followed them. He wasn't a rogue killer, he was a model employee. And that distinction is exactly what makes him so disturbing. Political philosopher Hannah Arendt, analyzing the Nazi war crime trials, introduced a phrase that fits Blokhin perfectly: the banality of evil. Ordinary people, extraordinary atrocities, bureaucratic systems that make both possible. The machinery of totalitarianism doesn't run on madmen alone. It runs on administrators, on quiet technicians, on people who separate their job from their conscience and show up every day. Blokhin didn't invent cruelty, he optimized it. He turned mass killing into shift work. That's not madness, that's efficiency. And efficiency is somehow more terrifying. You might expect that a man who killed thousands would eventually face consequences. He didn't. He was rewarded. Blokhin received commendations, promotions, state honors, a pension. He was considered loyal, professional, reliable. From the Soviet regime's perspective, Blokhin wasn't a criminal. He was an asset. And this is what historians find most unsettling about his story. Not the killings themselves, but the institutional response to them. The murders didn't hide in shadow. They were documented, filed, stamped, approved at the highest levels of government. Mass murder wasn't a bug in the Soviet system during this era. It was a feature, For decades, the Soviet government denied any involvement in the Katyn Massacre, blaming Nazi Germany instead. The lie held at the international level for 50 years. It wasn't until 1990 that Moscow officially admitted Soviet responsibility. By then, Blokhin had been dead for 35 years, and his name had almost completely vanished. After Stalin died in 1953, the political winds shifted. The new Soviet leadership moved to distance itself from the worst excesses of the Stalin era. Executions slowed, old loyalists were quietly removed, Blokhin was retired, his medals stripped, his official record sanitized. No trial, no reckoning, no public acknowledgement of what he'd done. He reportedly fell into severe depression after losing his role. Some sources suggest alcoholism consumed his final years. A man who had killed thousands with clinical detachment, ultimately undone by the removal of the only identity he had. He died in 1955. He was 60 years old. No history book chapter, no memorial, no cultural reckoning, just silence. Here's the deeper question. Why don't we talk about people like Blokhin? We obsess over dictators, cult leaders, charismatic monsters who fronted the violence, but we almost never discuss the people who made the systems work. Part of it is political. The Soviet Union controlled its own historical narrative for decades, and the full records weren't declassified until the 1990s, but part of it is psychological. Blokhin is more disturbing than Hitler or Stalin in a specific way, because he wasn't exceptional. He wasn't driven by ideology, or hunger for power, or megalomania. He was driven by a paycheck, by duty, by the quiet satisfaction of doing his job well. And that forces a question none of us want to sit with. How many people, given the same system, the same pressures, the same incentives, would have done the same thing? Let's try to contextualize the scale one more time. 7,000 personal executions during the Katyn operation. Some historians believe his career total was higher, potentially among the highest of any individual executioner in recorded modern history. And this was not warfare, not aerial bombardment, where distance provides psychological insulation. This was face-to-face, one person at a time, thousands of times. The psychological literature on trauma tells us that a single exposure to violent death can be permanently destabilizing. Combat veterans, first responders, trauma surgeons, they carry those experiences for life. Blokhin repeated his thousands of times. What does that do to a mind? Did he dissociate entirely? Was he so deeply indoctrinated that he felt nothing? Did he genuinely believe he was serving a righteous cause? Or, most disturbing of all, did some part of him simply adapt? We don't know. The records don't tell us. And the man himself never spoke publicly about what he did. The silence is part of the horror. Blokhin didn't create Stalinism. Stalinism created Blokhin. That's the most important line in this story. Totalitarian regimes require division of labor. One group drafts policy, another signs warrants, another transports prisoners, another digs graves, someone pulls the trigger. When responsibility is fragmented across enough hands, guilt diffuses. Everyone is just doing their part. Nobody feels like the killer, even when the body count is catastrophic. This is how industrial-scale atrocity becomes possible. Not through chaos, through structure. And this isn't just a lesson about Soviet history. It's a pattern that appears across regimes, across centuries, across contexts. The Holocaust, the Khmer Rouge, the Rwandan genocide, different ideologies, different geographies, but the same structural logic. Find people willing to follow orders, make those orders feel routine, reward compliance, punish hesitation. History is littered with Blokhins, most of them are nameless. So, here's where we land. The most prolific individual executioner in modern recorded history. A man who could kill 250 people before sunrise, who wore a leather apron to protect his uniform, who received medals for his efficiency, who died forgotten, stripped of the only role that gave his life meaning. Ask yourself something genuinely uncomfortable. If you were born into that system, if refusal meant your own execution, if obedience meant safety, if every institution around you normalized what was happening, what would you do? That's the real horror of Vasily Blokhin. Not that he was a uniquely evil person, but that he might not have been unique at all. Evil doesn't always roar. It doesn't always wear a uniform you recognize or give speeches that make your skin crawl. Sometimes it signs attendance sheets. Sometimes it clocks out at dawn and goes home to sleep. And history is full of people who let it. If you want more deep dives into the hidden figures who shaped history from the shadows, the mechanics, the operators, the people history forgot on purpose, subscribe now. Every week, we go deeper than the textbooks. Share this video with someone who thinks they already know history's worst villains. And drop a comment. Is Blokhin more terrifying than the dictators he served? And what does that say about systems, and about us? Because sometimes, the most dangerous person in history isn't the one at the top giving orders, it's the one at the bottom following them without question, and history is full of them.